For the past few months, I thought my house was just old. You know, creaky floors, strange noises at night, things shifting sometimes. But then I started noticing food disappearing from my refrigerator, kitchen cabinets opening by themselves, and almost every night around 2 a.m., I would hear footsteps in my attic. At first, I thought it was animals, until one night, I finally climbed up there with a flashlight and found something that definitely didn't belong in my attic. A sleeping bag, a backpack, and empty food wrappers, like someone had been living there, right above my house. I've been renting this house for about a year now. It's a small place, 2 bedrooms, a narrow hallway, old wooden floors that creak when you walk too fast. And above the second floor, there's an attic. The landlord mentioned it the day I moved in. He said it was mostly just empty storage space, old insulation, some wooden beams, nothing really useful. So I never had a reason to go up there. For the first few months, everything felt completely normal. Quiet neighborhood, no loud neighbors, no problems with the house, just normal living. Then one night, around 2 a.m., I heard something above the ceiling. At first it was soft, just a small shifting sound, like something sliding slowly across the floor. I opened my eyes, lay there for a moment, listening. Then it stopped. Old houses make noises. Pipes move, wood expands when the temperature changes. Animals sometimes get into the attic, so I didn't think much about it. But the next night, it happened again. This time the sound was clearer. Footsteps, slow, careful, walking across the attic floor. I sat up in bed, trying to figure out if I was imagining it. The sound lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then everything went quiet again. The next morning I told myself it was probably raccoons or squirrels. Animals get into attics all the time. But the noises kept happening, almost every night, usually around 2 or 3 in the morning. Sometimes it sounded like something being dragged across the floor. Other times, just slow footsteps, moving from one side of the attic to the other. After a couple weeks, I started getting used to it, or at least try to ignore it. Then other things started happening, small things. The kind of things you could easily explain away. One morning I woke up, and the cabinet above my kitchen sink was open. I was pretty sure I had closed it the night before, but maybe I forgot. So I shut it and moved on. A few days later, I noticed one of the dining chairs had moved just a few inches, pulled slightly away from the table. Again, I told myself I must have done it. Maybe without thinking. But the weirdest thing was the food. Every once in a while, something in the refrigerator would be missing. Nothing big, just small things. A yogurt, half a sandwich, a bottle of juice. At first I assumed I had eaten them and just forgot, which sounds ridiculous. But when you live alone, sometimes you just assume your memory is the problem. Still, the attic noises kept happening, every night, around the same time. Sometimes I would lie awake, listening to the footsteps above me, trying to convince myself it was just animals. But something about the sound felt wrong. Animals don't walk slowly across a floor, like someone trying not to make noise. They run, they scratch, they scurry. These sound like footsteps. Human footsteps. That thought started bothering me, more than I wanted to admit. So one weekend, I decided to check the attic, just to confirm it was animals, and get it over with. But when I stood under the attic hatch, I suddenly felt nervous, because once I looked, I couldn't pretend everything was normal anymore. So I didn't open it. I just walked away and told myself I'd deal with it later. For another week, the noises continued. Every night, Then one night, around 2:30 a.m., something slammed loudly above my bedroom. A heavy thump, like something falling. It woke me instantly, heart pounding. For a few seconds, I just sat there, listening. Then, very slowly, I heard movement again. Footsteps, walking across the attic. That was the moment I realized I couldn't ignore it anymore. So I got out of bed, grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen, and walked into the hallway. The attic hatch was in the ceiling above the hallway, a small wooden door with a pull cord hanging down. I stood there for a moment, listening, trying to hear if anything was still moving up there. But the house was silent now. Part of me wanted to go back to bed, pretend it was animals again. But another part of me needed to know, so I pulled the cord. The attic ladder unfolded slowly, the wood creaking as it dropped down. I climbed up a few steps and raised a flashlight, shining it into the attic. At first, it looked empty, just dust, wooden beams, and old insulation. The air up there felt cold and stale, like the space hadn't been opened in years. I slowly moved the flashlight across the floor, scanning the corners, looking for animals, or nests, or anything that could explain the noises. Then the beam of light stopped on something. In the far corner of the attic, near the wall, something that definitely didn't belong there. A sleeping bag, spread out across the floor, and next to it, a backpack and a pile of empty food wrappers. Like someone had been living up there. For a few seconds, I just stayed there on the ladder, holding the flashlight, trying to convince myself I was misunderstanding what I was seeing. Because a sleeping bag in the attic only meant one thing. Someone had been up there. The beam of my flashlight shook slightly as I moved across the corner of the attic. Next to the sleeping bag, there was a backpack, old and worn, half unzipped. Scattered around it were empty food wrappers, plastic bottles, and a couple crushed soda cans. The same brands of food I had been buying, the same snacks that had been slowly disappearing from my refrigerator. That realization made my stomach drop, because it meant something I hadn't wanted to believe before. Someone hadn't just broken in once. Someone had been living above me for weeks, maybe even months. I climbed the rest of the way into the attic slowly, my shoes pressing into the dusty wood, trying to see if anyone was hiding somewhere. The attic wasn't very large, just wooden beams, insulation, and a narrow space between the roof and the floor. There were no lights up there, only the narrow beam from my flashlight, moving across the darkness. I checked behind the beams, looked along the edges of the walls, even shined the light toward the far corners. No one was there, but everything up there told the same story. Someone had been staying there regularly. The sleeping bag was neatly laid out. The backpack looked organized. There was even a small flashlight sitting beside it, like someone used it every night. I suddenly felt extremely uncomfortable standing up there, like I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, like I had just discovered someone else's private space. And the worst part was realizing how close they had been the entire time, directly above my bedroom, above the kitchen, above the living room, listening to everything, every phone call, every conversation, every time I walked through the house. I climbed down the attic ladder quickly, my heart beating harder now. As soon as my feet hit the hallway floor, I pulled the ladder shut, pushed the attic door closed, and stepped away from it. The house suddenly felt different, like it didn't belong to me anymore. I walked through the house, checking the doors, making sure everything was locked, even though I knew it probably didn't matter. If someone had already been living inside the house, my hands were shaking when I picked up my phone and called the police. The operator asked me to stay inside and said an officer would be sent to check the house. While I waited, I sat on the couch in the living room, trying to stay calm, but my eyes kept drifting toward the ceiling, toward the attic above me. The house was completely silent, too silent. Every small sound made me tense. The refrigerator turning on, the wind brushing against the outside walls, even the ticking clock in the kitchen. About 10 minutes passed, maybe 15. Then I heard it, a faint sound above the ceiling. Footsteps, slow, careful, walking across the attic floor. My chest tightened instantly because I had just been up there, and the attic had been empty, which meant whoever had been living there had been hiding, quiet, perfectly still. While I was looking around, the footsteps moved slowly across the ceiling, directly above the living room. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. The steps stopped, right above where I was sitting. Then something gently shifted above the ceiling, like someone kneeling down. I stared at the attic hatch in the hallway, waiting, hoping it wouldn't move. Then I heard something else, a soft sound, right above the wooden attic door, like fingers, pressing lightly against the other side, testing it, almost like someone was checking to see if it would open. From above,